From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making an impact across the world. Moscow has warned the United States against allowing Ukraine to use longer-range weapons to strike Russian territory. This comes after Ukraine's missile attacks in the Sumy region, with Russia claiming Western support enabled the assaults. Ukraine argues its operations target only military sites, but Moscow asserts such strikes threaten escalation. The U.S. has yet to respond formally to these warnings as global concerns grow over prolonged conflict. Moscow says Western support provokes riskier attacks while Ukraine defends its sovereignty. President Volodymyr Zelensky said last week that Ukraine must do its best to end the war next year through diplomatic means, but he has shut down any talk of ceasefire before proper security guarantees are provided to Ukraine. Well, 7 people were killed and at least 15 others injured in a Russian missile strike on a school in Ukraine's Sumy region. Authorities say the attack occurred during a morning assembly, leaving the building in ruins. The Kremlin claims its targets were military-related facilities, but Ukrainian officials say civilian sites were clearly hit. This marks one of the deadliest attacks in the region this month, escalating international condemnation of Russia's tactics. Moscow continues to assert that all its strikes aim to disrupt Ukrainian military operations. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the operation also degraded Iran's missile production. Iran has denied such allegations, maintaining its nuclear ambitions are peaceful. The UN nuclear watchdog has called for transparency as uranium enrichment levels in Iran reach up to 60%, nearing weapons grade. Critics warn such strikes risk escalating regional tensions. Tehran filed complaints at the UN, calling Israel's actions illegal. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency reports that a large food convoy in Gaza was looted, with supplies forcibly taken from trucks meant for displaced families. Nearly 100 trucks carrying food for Palestinians were violently looted on November 16th after entering Gaza in one of the worst aid losses during 13 months of war in the enclave, where hunger is deepening. 2 UN agencies told Reuters on Monday that the convoy transporting food provided by UN agencies UNRWA and the World Food Program was instructed by Israel to depart at short notice via an unfamiliar route from Kerem Shalom border crossing. Louise Wateridge, UNRWA senior emergency officer, said 98 of the 109 trucks in the convoy were raided, and some of the transporters were injured during the incident, without detailing who carried out the ambush. The Hamas TV channel Al-Aqsa quoted Hamas Interior Ministry sources in Gaza saying that over 20 gang members involved in looting aid trucks were killed during an operation carried out by Hamas security forces in coordination with tribal communities.
There is no plan B within the UN agency, within the UN family, because there is no other agency geared to provide the same activities. And in reality, UNRWA is the response of the international community to the plight of the Palestinian refugees.
Members of the UN Security Council are demanding a significant increase in aid to Gaza as the humanitarian crisis deepens. Over 2 million residents are facing shortages of food, water, and medical supplies as winter begins. The assessment came after the U.S., in an October 13th letter, gave Israel a list of steps to take within 30 days to address the worsening situation in Gaza, warning that failure to do so may have possible consequences on U.S. military aid to Israel. Thomas Greenfield said Israel was working to implement 12 of the 15 steps.
We need to see all steps fully implemented and sustained. And we need to see concrete improvement in the humanitarian situation on the ground. That includes Israel allowing commercial trucks to move into Gaza alongside humanitarian assistance. This is crucial to avoiding famine. We also need Israel to address persistent lawlessness so that the hundreds of trucks of aid arriving at crossing points into Gaza can reach people in need.
We need a huge rise in aid. The situation is devastating and frankly beyond comprehension, and it's getting worse, not better. Winter's here. Famine is imminent. And 400 days into this war, it is totally unacceptable that it's harder than ever to get aid into Gaza.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza, as winter begins, is catastrophic, particularly developments in the north of Gaza with a large-scale and near-total displacement of the population and widespread destructions and clearing of land amidst what looks like a disturbing disregard for international humanitarian law. The current conditions are among the worst we have seen during the entire war and are not set to improve.
A rare Israeli strike in central Beirut killed the Hezbollah militant group's chief spokesman on Sunday in the latest targeted killing of a senior Hezbollah official. Hezbollah confirmed in a statement Mohammed Afif al-Nabulsi was killed in a strike on the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party office in Beirut. He had been especially visible after all-out war erupted between Israel and Hezbollah in September. Israel's military in a statement said he wielded significant influence over Hezbollah's military operations and glorified and incited attacks on Israel. Israel has dealt big blows to Hezbollah since late September, killing its leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah. Israeli airstrikes killed 14 more Palestinians in Gaza, including families sheltering in tents. That's according to medics. The strikes targeted areas deemed to host militants, but civilian casualties continue to mount. Israel says its operations are aimed at neutralizing Hamas capabilities, accusing the group of embedding fighters in civilian areas. The United Nations has raised concerns about the rising death toll, calling for a ceasefire to protect non-combatants. Israeli officials say Hamas bears responsibility for civilian casualties by operating within densely populated zones. Hostilities along the Israel-Lebanon border intensified with exchanges of rockets and artillery fire. Israel claimed its targets were Hezbollah positions in response to cross-border attacks, while Hezbollah asserted its operations were in defense of Lebanon's territorial sovereignty. Recent clashes have left multiple civilians dead and injured on both sides. The UN, again, has called for restraint, warning that the situation risks spiraling into a broader conflict. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein was expected in Beirut soon as negotiations continue. That's according to a U.S. source telling Reuters. Lebanon has officially responded to a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal to end border hostilities with Israel. Details of the response remain undisclosed, but sources say it includes requests for guarantees to protect civilian infrastructure. The proposal is part of U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein's effort to broker an end to escalations. Observers warn the window for peace is narrow amid intense fighting and increasing casualties. Hezbollah's stance on the agreement is unclear, but Israel demands a halt to cross-border rocket fire. More news from around the world in a moment. Stay with us on World Newsfeed on BNC. Welcome back to World Newsfeed. The G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro opened with a new global pact to tackle hunger and poverty. The agreement, led by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, aims to mobilize resources for agriculture, education, and healthcare in developing nations. Leaders highlighted the urgency of addressing food insecurity, which affects over 735 million people worldwide. However, critics question how the pact will be funded and implemented in light of political and economic divisions among participating nations. Supporters call it a landmark agreement, but critics warn of insufficient financial banking.
Não se trata apenas de fazer justiça.
This is a turning point for the world's most vulnerable communities.
Chinese President Xi Jinping unveiled a series of initiatives at the G20 summit to boost support for the Global South. Measures include expanded loans through the Belt and Road Initiative, focusing on infrastructure and climate adaptation in developing nations. Xi also announced new investments in agricultural technology to address food security issues. While some praise China's global leadership, critics warn the plan could burden poorer nations with unsustainable debt. Supporters see the move as transformational, while opponents call for greater transparency in funding. U.S. President Joe Biden has announced a record $4 billion in contribution to the World Bank's Fund for the Poorest Countries. The pledge aims to help vulnerable nations tackle climate change, economic challenges, and healthcare inequities. The fund is expected to benefit programs in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. While praised by world leaders, Republican critics in Congress question whether the money could be better spent on domestic priorities. Still in the U.S., or rather, members of the G20 posed on Monday for the official photograph of the Global Alliance to Combat Poverty and Hunger, with Rio de Janeiro's iconic Sugarloaf Mountain in the background, but without U.S. President Joe Biden and two others. Biden, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who were in a trilateral meeting, arrived late, missing the portrait. The trio arrived just as leaders got off the stage set for the photograph. Former President Donald Trump has promised to launch mass deportations as he is reelected, using the U.S. and military and declaring a national emergency. Speaking to supporters, Trump claimed that up to 15 million people would be removed, targeting those he described as a threat to American security. Immigration advocacy groups call the plan inhumane, saying it risks violating U.S. and international law. This rhetoric marks an escalation of his tough on immigration stance ahead of his inauguration. Supporters applaud the plan as a strong border policy, while opponents warn of legal and humanitarian concerns. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un has ordered an expansion of the country's nuclear forces, citing alleged U.S. threats. State media claims the decision is in response to military drills between the U.S. and South Korea, which Pyongyang deems provocative. The Biden administration maintains that its presence in the region is defensive, but experts warn that North Korea's nuclear escalation heightens risks for the region and beyond. North Korea blames U.S. imperialism, while Washington insists it defends regional allies. A march by Maori activists in New Zealand concluded in Wellington, where protesters rallied against a proposed Indigenous land bill. They argue the legislation would reduce Maori influence in land management decisions, violating historical treaties. Supporters of the bill claim it streamlines land use for economic development, which they say benefits the country as a whole. The protests has sparked a national conversation about Maori rights and New Zealand's commitment to equity. The government says the bill balances Maori rights with the need for national economic growth. On the lighter side, the world can't just get enough of My Girl Mu Dang. From late-night TV references to food, the immensely popular baby hippo from Thailand now has a theme song. Move Over, Baby Shark, the pygmy hippo, has her own song called Mudang Mudang, which is released in 4 languages, including English and Thai. Mudang became a breakthrough star online after her home zoo uploaded videos of her in its Facebook account. And good news for everyone, the song is available on your favorite streaming platforms. An original Filipino music going global with acts like P-Pop Kings, SB19, and the nation's girl group Beanie. But as they say, nothing beats the classics. How about the good old Bahay Kubo? The hit Australian children's musical group, The Wiggles, introduced their audience to this beloved Filipino folk song. Watch this.
What else is growing along the footpath?
Bahay kubo, kahit munti ang halaman doon ay sari-sari.
Well, the Wiggle member who sang Bahay Kubo is John Pierce, who is part Filipino. And John's Filipino mother, Mama Flor, made a special appearance in that performance. That's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us again tomorrow when we bring you the world in 30 minutes, only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money Comes Next. Keep it here on BNC.